belly is full. You guys are, you know what, I hate eating, I hate speaking when people are waiting to eat, because there's nothing worse than a room full of hungry Indians. We were just having some discussion just about CAP and about, just where we are at as Aboriginal people in this country. A little bit more about my bio. I recently moved to Ottawa. I'm in September, but I used to work at McGill. I worked at McGill for 6 years running the Native Student Center. And I was on the Friendship Center board in Montreal and, just working in the urban setting. Huge change, massive amount of change coming. I had a lot of Inuit students coming down from northern Quebec. And, the demographics of the urban world is changing for our people. And that's why I'm very honored to be asked to come speak tonight here to all of you from CAP, because as an organization, we all need to come together. Whether you're CAP, whether you're AFN, whether you're Native Women's Association, there's huge need. And I really see myself as being part of a solution. And unless I can see myself as part of a solution, I can't complain, right? So my mother always said, you can't complain about anything. This is my mom's story you're going to hear about, but she used to say that to us. If you can complain all you want, but you better have a solution to come up after you complain. So that's a little bit about why I'm very honored to be here. So I am going to have mine. I should turn it on. So my PowerPoint presentation, which is called I Dream, I Believe, I Am. And you're going to notice I'm not great at technology. So you're going to see a couple little stars and fire and all kinds of stuff out of my presentation. My 4-year-old daughter helped me make my presentation. So being here today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey getting here. I'm a proud Mohawk woman. I am from Ganawage, where my mother's from. And I'm also from Ohsweken, or Six Nations, where my father's from. And I was raised both on and off reserve. I was raised, born in my community, raised in Ottawa till I was 14, went home, spent the next 25 years there, and just moved back to town. So I'm the absolute definition of a transient person. But I love Ottawa, because it's like coming home a little bit. So a lot of people ask me, how did you get to the Olympics? And I remember asking my mother, before coming here, I said, well, what is the one word you'd want in Ganyat Geha that you would want the people to learn here tonight? What's the one thing you want all these people to go home with? And she said, there's one word that is at the root of everything it should be at the root of everything we do as Indigenous people. And I said, what is that? She says, it's Ganarungwatsara. So Ganarungwatsara, when you say to somebody, I love you, you say, Ezo Ganarunkwa. So Ezo, I give you big energy. That's what you're saying. But Ganarungwatsara is actually the ultimate power energy in the world. It's the most powerful energy there is out there. And when we speak about the creation of the Great Law and the Iroquois Confederacy, it was built on this Ganarungwatsara. That's what we talk about. And that Ganarungwatsara essentially is the power of love. And it's the power of love that should drive everything you do. She says, first, it's the love of yourself. You should love yourself. You should love yourself to take care of yourself, to honor yourself. And she said, you love your family, and then you love your clan, you love your nation. And that's how you should work, through love, not hate. Because love, she said, if you have Ganarungwatsat inside of you, it's like a well that never runs dry and will always empower you with good energy. She said, but if you run on hate and anger, it eventually will eat you alive. And as little kids, that was a big message to us. Well, I had this crazy dream growing up. This is a picture of me at the Olympics, playing in the best game of my life. It was against the Americans, and I scored a hat trick. I was pretty proud of myself. Woo! Because we always like to beat the Americans, right? That's like a Canadian thing. But, it's funny because you can see my suit's kind of ripped there. And I have a story about this suit, okay? This suit. So water polo suits are not very good looking. If anybody knows what a water polo suit looked like, you're covered up to here, and you're covered. It's really ugly. It's polyester because it's a contact sport, and you're constantly being grabbed, right? So we used to wear suits that were made out of polyester because they were the most, there's a reason why seat belts are made out of polyester, right? They're hard to break. So our suits were always made out of cheap things. Well, Speedo came out with a suit right before the Olympics that was supposed to be ungrabbable, and it was made from neoprene. Well, we know what neoprene's made out of, right? It's rubber. And they were like, don't worry, no one's gonna be able to grab it. Well, there's always edges to neoprene, right? There's always edges to a suit. And let me tell you, where there's a will, there's a way. If someone wants to rip something you're wearing, they'll do it. Anyway, so I was in this game, and I was like one of the fastest swimmers on the team, so I was getting ready, the shot clock's coming down, 10, 9, 8, and I'm getting ready to take off in the other direction and go on counterattack. And the person shoots, they miss, I turn around, I start swimming like fastest, and I'm just like slowing down. What is going on? I look down, and the whole front of my suit is missing, and it was filling up like a balloon. And I look back, and the American girl's holding the front of my suit up like this in her hand. I was like, oh my God. So there was a stoppage in play. My coach throws in a suit. Go change. There was nowhere to change. Like thousands of people looking at you, nowhere to go. So my teammates were like, don't worry about it. We'll just cover you up and you change. So I quickly changed, right? I finished the game. Little did I know, there was this show on every night in Australia that made fun of the Olympics. And their favorite thing to do was to make fun of the underwater cameras during the water polo games. So there I was, butt naked. And they knew about my Time magazine cover, which I was naked on the cover of that too. And they're like, this woman, she can't seem to keep her clothes on. Anyway, so it was an amazing experience to go here, to go to the Olympics. There's no employment equity on the Olympic team. They don't save spots for Native people on there. And so when I achieved that dream, it was on absolute sheer will and work, and I don't even know where places I had to go emotionally and spiritually to make it to the Olympics was incredible, but it was an incredible journey getting there. Thanks. But a lot of people wonder, so where did this all start, right? I mean, I didn't wake up one day and go, I'm gonna go to the Olympics. No way. It started with this woman. And this is, where'd she go? That's my mom. My mother was Continental Horn, and for those of you who don't know her, she was one of Canada's first Native rights activists. And she was born in a time in the 1940s where, what was expected of women, and not just Native women, women in general. You were expected to get married, have kids, when you're 18. And everything was geared towards that. Even all the high school, you were put into home ec and typing and, all those skills, where the guys went on and did sciences and stuff. And my mother, right from birth, did not want to follow anybody's rules. Even to this day. She's turning 75 next month. And she still kicks butt, my mother. But she was, known for a couple of things. And she really raised havoc in this town, let me tell you. But one of the things that actually ties into my life, I had no clue what my mother did. And the first time I ever heard about anything she did, I was in grade 7 in social studies class. And I watched a movie of her blocking the international bridge at Aguasasne in the 60s. And there's a movie that the NFB did called You Are on Indian Land. And I remember watching it, and that was the first time I saw it. And this is even before I was a twinkle in her eye. And there she is, you see pictures of her. She's not very big, right? She's a tiny woman. She was a model as well. She modeled at the time of Twiggy, right? So Twiggy was like 98 pounds soaking wet, right? And she was a heavy model at 120 pounds. Heavy, right? And tiny little woman. I get my height from my dad, right? From Six Nations. And she's sitting there on this movie getting arrested. And she was charged with assaulting 22 OPP officers. And I said, well, some of you know my mom in here, and you're like, yeah, she could do 5. 5 probably, yes. But 22 was, hit a little high. But another thing that she was known for that really ties into my life was in the 60s, in the early 60s, our Indian agent in Kahnawake, he signed an agreement with 33 municipalities around Kahnawake to dump their garbage on our reserve. And in the beginning, she said it wasn't so bad. It was like they would dump a roll of linoleum, right? And then everybody would have new floors, you know? She says, we even still have a table that she salvaged and refinished. It was an oak table. Like, people would dump everything. She says, one time, the Labatt's Brewery, which was right off the red, dumped an entire shipment of beer because the labels were upside down. And a whole bunch of Mohawks set up a bar right in the middle of there and sold the beer for like 5 cents. Anyway, so she wasn't so bad. But as time went on, more and more garbage built up, right? And with that came rats and mice and disease. And so there was a lot of complaints, and they wanted to move and all that. And so what she did was she didn't take no for an answer, because the Indian agent's like, sorry, there's nothing we can do. Sorry about that, you know. So my mom, being one of the most well-known Native people at the time, she says she called up the Deputy Minister of Indian Affairs, who at the time I think was John A. MacDonald, of all names. And she says, I want to do cultural teaching, or what is it, cultural sensitivity training, right? That's the word. And she says, and they said, oh, wonderful, Continetta, come down. And so before they left, my Uncle Frank and her 3 aunties, what they did is they live trapped a whole bunch of rats and mice. You know what live trapping is? I say this to Native people, and they're like, why would you live trap it? We trap to kill. No, I'm just kidding. So they live trapped all these rats and mice, stuck them in a box, and drove to Ottawa. And my mom said she walked in the room, and she's laughing. And the deputy minister comes up, and it was all the upper echelons of Indian Affairs, shakes her hand. Oh, how are you doing, Continetta? And she's like, oh, he's like, I'm so happy you're here. And she's like, my mom was like, I didn't even know how to do cultural sensitivity training. She says, so I stuck on a movie. You know what movie she stuck on? Nanook of the North. Anyone ever seen Nanook of the North? She's like, that's the only movie I knew about at the time. And they watched the movie, right? And right after, the deputy minister stands up. He says, oh, thank you, Continetta. Thank you so much for, teaching us. And she's like, oh, no, I want to talk about what it's like to be an Indian on a reserve now, like today. She says, and she pulls out her purse, and she says, and I was wearing my best suit, she said. I don't know why she was telling me this, but she talks about this red suede suit, and she had white boots on. And my Uncle Frank is like, yeah, and he's like, your mom, she grabbed her purse, and she had caught this rat in her house, okay? And she had put it in the fridge and let it fester for 2 weeks. So she pulls it out, and she holds it up by its tail. And she's like, look what I found in my house. And she starts talking about it. And my Uncle Frank, he goes, people were getting all freaked out, and they were trying to keep the rats quiet in the box, which was sitting on the table right next to her. And everyone's like, oh my God. And she was holding this rat and swinging it around, talking about what it's like to live on a reserve as a Native person. And then she dropped it by mistake, and the guts kind of went everywhere. And all the women were freaking out, and the box got so freaked out, like the rats were getting so excited, it started to move. And my Uncle Frank's like, he stops the story and goes, do you remember what pants looked like in the 60s? And I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? And she's like, they were like big bell bottoms. Even people in suits wore bell bottoms. And I'm like, all right. He goes, I saw that box moving across the table. I knew that was the time I should bend down and tuck my pants into my socks. Because in the next 2 seconds, the box fell off the table and all the rats came pouring out. And he said it was absolute chaos for like 15 minutes. There were his aunties sitting in the back smoking, him standing there, my mom, for 15 minutes, they didn't even move. Rats were running everywhere. And he's like, those pants, those bell bottoms were like a superhighway for those rats, right up their legs. Chaos ensued. He said, and guess what? The dump got moved after that. So fast forward 40 years. I'm in Ottawa, post-Olympics, at a conference. And I get called up on the stage, by the MC. And I didn't win a medal at the Olympics, okay? I came 5th. I'm happy with that. But I'm up there with all these medalists, right? The Donovan Baileys and the Gaetan Bouchers and the Marianne Limperts, and everybody knows who they are. They all know each other. They all have a special handshake. They know each other. It's like a club. And they're looking at me going, we don't know you. You're not in our club. And I'm like, yeah, I'm the token Indian, okay? But I'm the only Native person to go to the Olympics that year. So I'm standing up there, and the MC says, there's a special guest that wants to, come and meet you guys. And I'm like, oh, cool. And I don't know if you guys remember, who is the only, a little piece of trivia, who's the only Minister of Indian Affairs that has gone on to become Prime Minister of Canada? Jean Chrétien, right? He's also known for another thing, right? The white paper. Yes, I grew up knowing exactly what that was. So there, in through the back doors walks the Prime Minister of Canada, and I'm like, oh, wonderful, Mr. White Paper's here, right? And everybody's clapping. I'm like, okay, be good, be nice, be professional. So he's got this aide, and his aide's whispering in his ear saying, this is so-and-so, this is the Olympics they're at, this is what they won. He's going down through everybody, shaking their hand, and then he gets to me, and before his aide can say anything, he looks at me and he goes, how is your mother? And I go, she's fine. She says, oh, she was a fighter, your mother. She kicked my ass, you know that. And I'm like, yeah, she could probably still do it. And he goes, you tell your mother I said hello. And I'm like, I will for sure. I went home that night, and I said, hey, Mom, guess what? I guess who says hi? And she says, who? I said, the Prime Minister of Canada. She goes, he remembers me? I said, Mom, you let rats go in his office. You don't forget that. His office building. Anyway, so my mother, why is that important to tell you? Is my mother, first and foremost, refused to live in the box. She danced by her own tune, and at that time, I mean, I cannot believe how hard it must have been. And she didn't take no for an answer. She figured out how to get things done. New creator, and she never lost her sense of humor, right? Like the great Native sense of humor, the great Indigenous sense of humor. We can never lose that, right? So here's my mom trying to get into Buckingham Palace to inform the Queen that she's claiming England in the name of the Mohawk Nation. And he goes, what are you talking about? And she said, well, you came and there were millions of us there and you claimed it in the name of England. She didn't get it, but she got a laugh at it. But my mother was, she started having kids kind of late, 31, grandmother territory in our world, right? And boy, were her aunties happy because they thought totally she was going to be an old maid. And when she started having kids, she really started having kids. And, she really, she was brought up by aunties, uncles, grandparents. But when she had us, she said, I had an intentional plan with you kids, with you girls. She was building the next generation of disease-free, high-achieving warriors. That's what she was going to do. And she made two very important decisions in our life that impacted that. One, no drugs and alcohol were allowed in our home. And not even cigarettes. I mean, I was born in 75. Everybody smoked in 75, right? Even your doctor be smoking while he's testing you out. I tell young people now, I'm like, on planes there used to be no smoking sections on recycled air planes. How many of you guys remember that when they disallowed that, remember? Well, my mother was anti-smoking. That's probably why her and my dad didn't work out. He smoked. She wouldn't even let him smoke on her property. It was like, get off my property. So my mom was very, very serious about that. And the other thing she did was she put us into sports. Every cent she had. When I was under a year old, she moved us to Ottawa. She got a job. She was a single mother, so me and my two older sisters. My father, who's a wonderful person, a wonderful man, we didn't grow up with him. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that he went to residential school. And, he was very well educated, an incredible man. Went all the way to Stanford to get his PhD. Some of you guys might even actually know him. He was worked in Ottawa forever. But he wasn't really around. So my mom was our mom and dad. And she moved us right across the street from the YMCA, right downtown. She got a 2-bedroom apartment. She rented out both bedrooms. And we all slept on the pull-out couch, me and my sisters and my mom. And she put every cent she had into sports. And she put us into swimming and she put us into running. She chose sports specifically that were not judged. She didn't want our nativeness to get in the way. She wanted us to go against the clock. So here I am. So now that we have cell phones, there's millions of pictures out there, right? But I'm born in the time of plain old film. Being the third of 4 daughters. My oldest sister is about 1,000 studio shots of her. This is one of 2 pictures that I was in. And I think I'm surprised that my picture's getting taken. And this is a picture of my mom on our first Halloween here in Ottawa, right across the street from the Y. And we didn't have a lot, honest to God, we didn't have a lot, but we had a mother who believed so much in us and believed in her mission to give us a life. And the interesting thing is a lot of people wonder, so was she really like, you hear about these like hockey moms and dads, and I'm not talking the ones that are, I'm talking about the psycho ones that they banned from arenas. You know what I'm talking about? Every sport has them. We had swim parents that got banned. And my mother wasn't. It's interesting, when I went to the Olympics, she still didn't know the rules of water polo. She thought I could shoot anytime I touched the ball. My little sister drove her nuts. She's like, Mom, she's been playing forever. Her attitude was, I don't care what you do, just don't do anything half-assed. That was her attitude. Do it to the best of your capabilities. You come from a people, that's what we did. We did everything perfectly. And, it was really interesting to have someone say that, just don't do it half-assed. And she was very hands-on. She would get in, she swam with us. You cannot, honest to goodness, you can't replace having a parent there, having someone there. It means the world. Just physically being there. And it doesn't have to be a parent. It can be an auntie, it can be an uncle, it can be a grandparent. But having that someone who is 100% focused on you means a lot to a kid. So she wanted us to learn some really important things. And perseverance. Sorry about that. My technology got a little carried away. See if this works. So perseverance. Now, I tell people this because it's kind of a hard thing to teach young people. Because it took me 17 years to get to the Olympics. 17 long years. And we live in an age of instant gratification, am I right? Example of that. How many of you guys have cell phones in here? Everybody. How many of you guys have gotten in a fight with your significant other because they haven't answered a text within 10 seconds of you sending it? Come on. Everybody has, right? Oh my gosh, she's mad at me. Oh my God. Well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that. Yeah, it's true. We live in this instant. Do you remember the days where you would call somebody, leave a message, maybe they would get it, and they might give you a call back the next day, and that was okay, right? Oh, I left a message with them. Somebody over there, right? And it was really, I remember when like answering machines came into the scene, and you actually could like, wow, there's a message left for me. Awesome. It's changing, but that instant gratification and the fact, the expectations that come along with that, very hard to teach a young person that it might take you 10, 15, 20 years to get to where you want to go. And even then, my Olympics was down to qualifying. We had to beat the Americans at the qualification tournament, and it boiled down to a 1-goal game. So perseverance, very hard. My sister said, through sport, learning to push herself, she would never become a doctor had she not been an athlete first. Respect was another thing that was really important to her. Now, my mom had this saying, I'm very proud you of being a Mohawk woman. Be very proud of who you are. She says, but first, never forget you're a human being. And I was like, I was wondering what she meant by that. And she would say, if you remember you're human first, you'll never be lonely. You'll always find humanity with other people. And on the journey I was going on, I was going to really need to understand that I had to find that common humanity with other people, because let me tell you, not a lot of Native people on the Olympic team. So if I had that wall up between me, and when you're competing at that level, it's almost like you have to be telepathic with your teammates. So if you're like, I'm Native, you're white, stay back, you're not even going to get there. I'm sorry. It's not even going to work. You have to drop those walls. You cannot be afraid. And that common humanity is what allowed me to do that, and the respect. She wanted us to learn achievement, and that's a funny thing because people are like, that makes sense. Everybody wants to achieve. Saying you want to achieve something is a terrifying thing. You ask a kid now, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you know, oh, I'm going to do that, I want to be this. But there's always a couple of people that fear because there's a chance you might not do it. So it's easier to say, I don't know, than actually say it, I want to do that. Because failure is terrifying. Failure, someone can make fun of you if you fail. Failure hurts. But you cannot get where you're going without some form of failure along the way. It's impossible. Nobody gets anywhere without failing about 1,000,000 times before they get there, or losing, or whatever. It's part of the journey. So achievement, and to say, I want to become an Olympic athlete, it's a bold statement when a young person says, I want to be. And then they work and work and work at it, getting there. So my mom was also very passionate about telling us what was possible. How many of you guys remember this guy? I'm talking to a crowd that might remember, Alwyn Morris. You know, I talk about this. He's from my community of Ganawage. And he, I cannot tell you what it meant to have an Olympian in my community. First and foremost, 1984, I'll never forget that year because I wasn't going to find out about the Olympics unless someone told me about it. I mean, we live in the age of Google. You want to know something? Google it, right? It's even a verb now in the English language. Google it. I had to have my mother show me who he was. And I remember we had a swim meet in Clayton, New York, not far from here. And we were camped out. We had this big van. We used to drive from swim meet to swim meet. And she pulled us all around the van. She pulled out little black and white television. She plugged it into the lighter. She pulled out 2 coat hangers, stuck it in the back. And then she pulled out 2 balls of aluminum foil and stuck it on top. How many of you guys remember? You know what I'm talking about, right? And you know, I have to set the stage because, you know, back then there was 2 channels on television, right? Like there was CTV and CBC where they went off the air at midnight, you know. And I remember her playing around with the snow, which young people have never seen snow on their television in their lives. And she's playing around with the snow. And I go, what are you trying to get? She's like, I'm trying to get the Canadian Olympic feed. And I was like, what's the Olympics? And I was like 7 years old at the time. She says, that's where all the best athletes in the world go. And there's a Mohawk, and he's trying to become Olympic champion. If he wins, he's the best in the whole world. I was like, and in my little mind, I was like, I want to do that. Oh my God. It was like a light went on in my head. And I'll never forget, as she's talking to me, the starting blocks of the men's 1,000 meters came through that snow. And there was Alwyn and his partner. The gun went off. He shot out there. And I look at my mom and go, what do we do? She says, you got to cheer, you got to cheer. So me and my sisters, I think we cheered so hard we started to levitate. Like, we're like, come on. And just so excited. And when he passed that finish line first, and he got out of his boat, went up to the podium, bent down, got his medal, he stood up and pulled out that eagle feather and held it over his head. And in my little 7-year-old mind, I was like, he knows I'm watching him. He did that for me. I totally thought he knew I was watching. And I had that picture on my wall for 17 years. And my mom looked at me and she said, what do you think? We're all going crazy. And I looked at her and I said in a very dreamy voice, I said, I want to go to the Olympics. I want to do that. And she looked at me, rather than laughing, which you often do when kids say these crazy things, she said, you know what? You can do it, and I'll help you. I'll do whatever it takes to help you. And as a mom, as a single mom, that was a huge statement. There was another event that was really important that came out that year, a movie called Running Brave. Anybody remember that movie, Running Brave? About Billy Mills. So Billy Mills, he's Lakota Sioux from Pine Ridge, South Dakota, one of the 3 poorest counties in all of the United States. And he went all the way to the Olympics in Tokyo and won the men's 10,000 meters. And what I love, I've got a chance to work with Billy and speak. And I remember asking him, you know, like, so what was it about? He tells his story. He says, I remember walking down and they were warming up, and he had never won a major international race in his life. Not one. He was a good NCAA athlete, no problem. He won titles, he was All-American, never won international race. And he said there was 2 Americans that qualified for the final. The American contingent walks over to him and they're like, way to go, Billy. Have a good race. Try to finish, okay? And they walked over to the other American. They're like, okay, you ready to win? You know, like, let's do this, and this is the strategy. And they really had no expectations. And I want to show you, and unfortunately there's no sound, but I want to show you what his final lap of his race was. It has been voted one of the top 10 finishes in Olympic history. So hopefully it will work. And I will be the announcer on this. So they're in Tokyo, 1964, right? So there you have Billy. He's wearing the dark jersey there on the outer part. 10,000 meters is the equivalent of a 10K for those who don't know. So here he is, and anybody who's ever run track, it's a very contact sport. So he gets hit, right? And that short guy who's pushing on the front, he's the defending world champion. Right next to him is the defending Olympic champion. So he's sitting there, he's pretty comfortable. He's like, okay, I'm in 3rd place. I could probably hang out here, you know, and he's coming around at the 200 meter mark. 200 meters left, coming around the last part. And I'm gonna let you see the last 100 meters is what makes this one of the top 10 finishes in Olympic history. I wish you could hear the commentator because he freaks out. So there you see him. Isn't that an awesome run? And I apologize for the technical difficulties. But you know, having Billy, so last year was I think the 50th anniversary of that win. No one from all of the Americas has ever won that race, ever, again. He's the only person from all the Americas ever to win that. And I remember asking him one question. I said, so here you are in 3rd place. Why would you get into the scrum, risk tripping to come first? I don't get it. You got a medal. It makes, like, it's safe. You could have risked it. You could have fallen and come last. And he said, you know, first and foremost, you don't train for the Olympics thinking you're going to come 3rd. You train every day that you're going to come first. I said, yes, I agree. And he said, sometimes when we're out there and we're going after our dream, we'll put 98% of our effort on the table. Boom, there, 98%. There you go. And you keep that 2%, just a little bit for yourself. And I go, why do you keep that? He says, that 2% you keep for yourself is in case. What if I fail? I got to be able to pick myself up again. It's a little bit of that. What if I'm scared? That 2% you keep. He said, sometimes you put that other 2% on the table. Yes, sometimes you might fall and trip, and sometimes you might become Olympic champion. But unless you put that last 2% on, you will never know what your full capability is. And he said, you know what one of the best thing about being a Native person is? And I said, what is that? And he said, if we fall, our people will pick us up, dust us off, and help us go forward. We're lucky that way. He said, that's one of the best things about being Native. And I thought, you know, it's really that message of much worse than having a failed dream is never having the courage to dream it in the first place. It's never having the courage to put all of what you are on the table when you want something. That fear of failure, I think, is what stops a lot of people from achieving what they really could and the top of their mountain. You know, sometimes when I was growing up, I also was shown a lot of people that could have been and could have gone to the Olympics, could have been in the NHL, and I'd always ask myself, what happened? What happened to them that they didn't get there? And I learned when I was 14 years old just how traumatic life could be and what can really stop you in your tracks. For me, it was something called the Oka crisis, and a lot of you guys will remember that or have learned about that. Well, I was a 14-year-old girl, and I had been brought up a lot in Ottawa. I mean, racism? My goodness, I went to school at Glashan. right next to the bus station. 80% ethnic. If you said some racial slur, you got beat up 5 different times for saying whatever you said. It was just like, no, and I mean, I knew racism when I was a kid. But you could address that. I remember during the Oka crisis and when my mom brought me and my little sister, who was 4 at the time, brought us back to Ganawage, and watching those race riots, I was like, I mean, from the darkness and watching these people just losing it, trying to get at us, burning Mohawks in effigy, and I was just like, it was incredible. It was incredibly scary because I couldn't go beat that up. It was something wrong, something systematically wrong with that, But I also saw some really amazing things. I saw, and this never left me, I saw powerful women, and not just Mohawk women. I saw Oneida women. I saw Coast Salish women. These women came and they showed me how to be a strong woman. And it was interesting because the media used to criticize our people a lot because, oh, look, they hide behind the skirts of the women. I said, but in Mohawk culture, women have the right to declare war, and we also have the right to call our warriors back. Because we are the life givers. And in the end, you're defending that. You're defending life. You're defending the love of life and your children. So I saw a lot of amazing things that summer that I'll never forget. And as a 14-year-old, really took my rose-colored glasses off, and I had to express, like if you wanted to have the ultimate Indigenous Studies program, boom, in one summer. But at the very end, I remember September 26th was when we decided to end the crisis. It had been 78 days. So 78 days of incredible, intense pressure. They had called in the Canadian Armed Forces, which I think was a massive misuse of the armed forces. And I remember actually having conversations with quite a few people during the Oka, like from across the barbed wire, talking to them, like, what are you doing here? I remember yelling at them, just like, we don't have a choice. Like, we don't want to be here. Like, that was a lot of what I heard. Yes, there were some that loved it, and they enjoyed being there, and they enjoyed every moment of it. But there were a lot of people. And, as a 14-year-old, I just, that was to have those discussions, but experience it. And I ended up with my little sister and my mother in the treatment center in Ganasdage. So we were encircled on the size of a football field, a postage stamp. And my job was to make 2 meals a day. I would make the midnight meal, and I'd make the breakfast meal, and I would take it out to the bunkers and feed the warriors. And a lot of people wonder, they're like, so, we heard that you could have had a fire, you had so many weapons. I said, we had enough bullets to last 10 seconds in a firefight. 10 seconds. I remember that. The warriors were on these 24-hour shifts manning the barricades, right? And sometimes they were so exhausted, they'd be like, Waneek, go out there and man that barricade. And I remember sitting, that famous big barricade that was on the road. I remember sitting there with my buddies one night. They wouldn't let us have guns, so they gave us baseball bats. And I'm sitting there with my baseball bat, and I'm like, oh my God, if they peek over, we've lost it all. But so until September 26th, we decided to leave. And right before we left, there had been negotiations. The Mercier Bridge had been given back, and we were supposed to go out the front gates, get onto buses, and be taken off to a military prison. But about 20 minutes before we were leaving, the army suddenly pushed the media barricade back about 200 to 300 meters. And the sun was coming down, it was getting dark, and we freaked out. We were like, if the media doesn't see us, anything could happen. A shot's fired, we're all done for. So rather than march right out the front gates, we took a right turn at the barbed wire, right? And there's me. I was given the money and the ID of all the little kids, and I was supposed to get them to safety. They didn't want us to get confused with the adults, so they put us right in the front. And we started walking, and we took a right-hand turn, and we went to a corner of the barbed wire where there's only 2 levels of barbed wire. And we took out a spinal board. Someone had a spinal board like for injury, and put it on top of the barbed wire. And then everybody just started spilling out. And just chaos broke loose. Like the soldiers started tackling the warriors, and it was just fights were breaking out, and it was absolute chaos. And up until that point, my little sister had stayed very calm, and we were singing a traditional song together to keep her calm. But when she started to see all these fights and all these people freaking out, she started to make a sound that was very distinct. And I know a lot of you guys have kids or grandkids, and you know the sound that a child makes when they're sad or they're hungry or they're mad. But there's a very, very special sound they make when they are terrified they're going to die. And I can hear it like it was just 2 minutes ago that she started screaming like that. And she's looking at me with these big eyes with absolute terror, screaming terror in her face. And I looked at her and I was like, oh my God, I got to get her out of here. And I looked up and there was a soldier, about 18 years old, non-native guy, blonde. I remember him being blonde. And he was standing there completely frozen in front of me. And he was terrified. And he stood there with his gun and looked at me. And I looked at my little sister. I said, he's not going to hurt us. He's not going to hurt us. And I looked at him. I just pushed him backwards. And he took a step back. And he let me walk out right onto the highway. And I fought my way. I was trying to get to the press barricade. And I fought my way there. And when I got to the press barricade, I recognized a soldier. I remember him because 2 weeks earlier, he didn't allow my school books to be allowed in. So I was like, my grade 10 math books or something. I was like, on principle, I want my books. But really, I didn't want them. And I remember arguing with him. And so when I got there and I fought my way, I said, I know you. And I pointed my finger and I pulled my little sister behind me. And as I did that, I got hit in the chest. And it was like that feeling of when you get hit on a schoolyard and you lose the breath and you're like, and you lose your breath. That's what it was like. And I fell forward and someone kicked my feet out from underneath me. And my little sister landed on top of me. And someone snapped a picture right at that moment. And a lot of people ask me, what were you thinking? I don't remember this picture being taken. And I always wondered why. I remember it in flashes. I remember it in smells. And if you could tell me how I felt, it was like I felt so much pain, so much anger, so much sadness, so much fear, all at the same time. I felt like I was going to explode. And I remember it in flashes. And later on, someone told me that's what happens when you're in extreme, extreme, extreme fear. Your mind shuts down in order to protect you. And right after this picture was taken, they grabbed the back of my shirt and they dragged me back to where my mother was and where they had been encircled everybody. And I gave my little sister to my mother. And then I looked down and I had blood all over my shirt. And I went, oh my God. And I looked in my shirt and I had been stabbed. I didn't know that there had been an order to put bayonets on the ends of their weapons. And I got hit in the chest and had hit off my sternum and gone to the side. So after that, we got put on buses and taken to a military base that became a prison. And then I got to see a doctor 22 hours later. And when I finally saw the doctor, he said, you're very lucky to be alive. I said, why? He said, because had it been a centimeter each way, it would have gone right into your heart. And I have a really big scar right here. And many years later, when I was in a change room in Australia, I was in the shower, showering after a game, and an Australian water polo player looks at me and she goes, is that a breast implant scar? And I go, don't you think I would have paid more for more than a negative A? And she goes, what is it then? And I go, I got stabbed by a soldier. She's like, what? And it made me more tough, right? In my sport, that was important. But I remember after that, for 6 days, I didn't even know I was suffering from post-traumatic stress. Everybody was. Like I didn't even know what that was. But all I knew is that I was terrified. And I locked myself in my room here in Ottawa, and I covered the windows, and I hid. And I would only go out to go to the washroom and get food and go back in. And after 6 days, my mom came in, and she sat down on the chair, on the bed, and she took my hand, and she says, well, what do you want to do? And I go, well, I'm so angry, I'm so hurt, I'm so scared, I don't know what to do. I want to quit everything. And she says, you have one of the best reasons in the world to quit. No one would ever judge you. She says, but you know, you had this dream of going to the Olympics. And you know, at 14, I was already Ontario provincial swimming champion. I had city records in running in Ottawa. And I was being scouted for the juvenile national water polo team. I was starting to show signs that I was going to be able to do this Olympic thing. And she looked at me, she said, if you quit now, you're handing over your dream to that soldier, boom. And you'll always be his victim, always. She says, but I love you and I'll support whatever you do, I promise. And she stood up and she turned to walk away. And then she turned back at me and she goes, but you know what? I want you to know, I did not raise you to be anybody's victim. And then she turned around and walked out. And you know what? That's exactly what I needed to hear. It was the hardest decision, right? 14 years old. Who gets that decision? But I went back 2 days later to water polo practice. Walked on deck right over at Carleton University. Walked on deck, my all-white water polo team. If I hadn't learned all those years ago about respect and about humanity, do you think I would have been able to go from the race riots of Ganawage onto a pool deck with non-native teammates? Do you think I would have been able to differentiate? No, but she taught me about humanity, and that was important to her. And respect and achievement and perseverance and all those tools that my sport taught me made me able to go back to what I loved and what essentially saved my life. You know, I suffered a lot from post-traumatic stress disorder. And I, in a lot of ways, I think Indigenous people, we suffer from somewhat of a collective, and unless we identify it, we pass that on to the next generation. We pass that anxiety and that fear and all of that stuff that stifles our dreams. And I don't want that. I don't want that for my children. I look back and I go, one of the most important things that I learned was we have to change the way we look at our history. I came home one day when I was 18 years old, and I walked to my mom's house and she goes, did you know that 100,000 Iroquois warriors died on the Ohio Valley in 16 something something? And I was like, okay. It was like she just saw it on CNN, right? 100,000 Iroquois warriors dead, more at 11, And I was like, what do I do with that? Like, thank you for the boulder. Let me put it on the back with all the other boulders I'm dragging behind me. I didn't know what to do with that, right? What do we do with it? So I went to bed that night, and I laid down, and I started thinking practically. Okay, someone had to survive that battle or I wouldn't be here, correct? Correct. So I started thinking about, wow, okay, so you're out on that battlefield, and that's what my warrior looked like, right? I'm a big fan of Last of the Mohicans. Okay, so, and can you imagine being on that battlefield with all of those warriors and looking around, and your brothers, and your uncles, and your sisters, and everybody's falling. And I thought to myself, why didn't my ancestor just lay down and go with them? Because we have that teaching, 7 generations, that we have to keep fighting, that we have to keep going forward for that 7th generation. And in a way, our people have been put through somewhat of a natural selection, right? War, disease, famine. If you weren't tough, if you weren't strong, if you weren't smart, all the things that I was told as a young athlete that Native people weren't, that we were lazy, that we're stupid, that we're quitters. You know what? Our ancestors couldn't be any of those things, because if you were lazy, if you were a quitter, if you were stupid, you did not survive. We did not have the luxury of being any of those things. So I looked at that warrior and I said, you fought to be alive so I could be here. And not just so I could survive, not just so I could still cry over what you went through. You fought so I could thrive. And how do I honor that ancestor? How do I do that? Well, I'm sure that he would want me to be the happiest, the most successful, the toughest, the strongest, the most incredible, the smartest, because he didn't have the luxury of doing any of that. He was just surviving. And I think about, how do I want my descendants to remember me? 7 generations down the road, I want them to look back and say, my great-great-grandmother, oh, I don't want them crying that I was stabbed. Heck no. I want them to think, she was cool, man. My great-great-grandmother, she kicked butt, and she had good hair. I think about it. I want them to look at me as a source of that strength and power. And it's through reinventing and saying, I'm descendant from the best of my people, was how I turned my history around into something that could empower me. So I walked on the pool decks the next day, and I'm a morning person, give me coffee. But most of my teammates weren't, so they'd be like, oh no, here comes Waneek. And I'd be jaunting on. I was walking deck with my swagger, and they're like, what's up with Waneek? And I'm like, I'm descendant from the best of my people. What about you? And they're like, what does that mean? And I'm like, I am born from ass kickers. That's all it means. But it was really important. And it's important. It was important Indigenous psychology for me. And dreams are hard. They're hard for a reason. If dreams were easy, you go down to Walmart, you get a 6-pack, and everybody's America's Got Talent or America's Top Chef or whatever. The reason they're special in their dreams is because they're hard. And because there's 1,000 times you want to quit. And this summer when you watch the Pan Am Games, you're going to see the people that are up on the podium. And let me tell you, they're going to cry their little hearts out. And you're probably wondering, ever wonder what they're crying about? I'm sorry, they're not crying because they're excited that Harper's going to call them. Sorry, they're not crying because of that. They're actually crying because they're thinking of all the times they almost quit. They're thinking about the forks in the road. They're thinking about those almost. And they're saying, oh my God, I did it. I did it. That's what they're crying about. And when you find out what your one reason is, you hang on to it. When I was going up to the Olympics, it was my little sister. She was my reason never to quit, because if I quit, then I was showing her how to quit. My reason now are my children. I just can't show them how to be quitters. I have to show them how to be tough and warriors. This is the saying my mom used to say, you are a Mohawk woman, you can fly as high as you can, dream, and I will help you. Well, this is, no, sorry, my technology again, I'm sorry. Oh, I'll go back to that, but I want to show you a picture of my mom. Let's see if it works. So my mom, I told you those 2 decisions that she made, right? Well, out of that decision, she got some pretty good results. There we go. That's my mother. And right behind her is Dr. Ogisto Horn, first Mohawk woman doctor, mother of 6 children. She wanted to be a doctor ever since she did her grade 4 science fair project on the human skeletal system. She could name every bone in the body. She was the biggest nerd. And she still is the biggest nerd. But we all know they inherit the earth, right? Nerds, it's okay to be a nerd. So she went on, she worked, got into McGill, pre-med, anatomy, cell biology. But she met a nice Soto guy from Saskatchewan. And they had some babies. Boom, in her undergrad. Suddenly her professors are saying, oh, maybe you shouldn't be a doctor, maybe you should be a technician or a nurse. Suddenly, like, having kids makes you not smart. So she called home crying, what do you think I should do? And we said, just work harder. And man, one thing my sister can do is work hard. So she worked and worked and worked and worked. And she got admitted to UBC Medical School. She picked up her kids, moved to BC, started med school. In her second year medical school, she got pregnant again. And I said, well, just so you know how this works now. You're a medical student. And, she's like, I gotta hide it. I'm gonna get in trouble, And, unfortunately, me and my sisters were not the kind of pregnant people that are like cute little Hollywood bellies, We don't just birth it, we house the next generation for 9 months. Like huge bellies, right? I gained 65 pounds each kid. I was like massive. And everybody thought I was like full term when I was 6 months. It was crazy. So my sisters were the same way. And I remember she got called into the dean's office when she started to show. And he said, you need to quit medical school. She said, why? She said, because it's not morally right. You're here, you're pregnant. You should stay home until your kids are in school. Then you should come back. And she said, are you kicking me out? He says, no, I'm not kicking you out, but you shouldn't be here. So she called home. She's crying. Do you think I should quit? What do you think? Is it bad for me to be here? We said, are you kidding me? Just work harder. So she worked harder. And her daughter was due June 6th. She had 8 exams on her end of her second year. Her last one was June 3rd. And she said when she waddled into that final exam, 799 classmates all stood up and cheered. And she said she couldn't even fit in the desk. She had to like go sideways and like lower herself down. And she said over this next 6 hours in that exam, she got so stressed out, she was having Braxton Hicks. So she's going, check, check. And she was so stressed out. But anyway, she finished the exam. And the baby was born a week later. She went on, had another one in residency, picked up 2 stepkids, moved home, and has delivered almost 1,000 babies in my community. Now, what an incredible oldest sister. Like, let me tell you, you want an older sister that tells you that this is how we get it done. And the most interesting thing about her daughters are now teenagers, the ones she moved out to BC with. Guess what they're studying to be? Doctors. They're in college to become doctors. Why? Because as Indigenous people, before schools existed, if you wanted to learn how to hunt, you took them and hunt. If you want to learn how to plant, you took them and taught them how to plant. She was teaching them how to go to med school by taking them with her. And now she's created 2 more doctors, which is an incredible thing. My next sister, Dr. Gohande Horn-Miller, she's the new Sun Chair at Carleton University here in Ottawa. She's the mother of 4 daughters, single mom. She's incredible. If you ever get a chance to see a lecture, she's incredible. Then there's me. I have a degree. Yes, my mother forced me to get a degree. I thought that I was going to be a millionaire water polo player. Yeah, thank God she made me get a degree. I'm a Carleton graduate. And then there's my little sister, who was kind of a oops. She was born when my mother was 46. She thought she was going through menopause. She even had a party. Yes, done. I don't have to deal with this anymore. No, you're pregnant. She was the oldest woman in Ontario that year to have a baby. My little sister's an actor. And you might know her because she's in some TV shows. She's in a show right now on Netflix called Hemlock Grove. She plays a gypsy prostitute fortune teller. I'm very proud of her. She was on an Alien on Defiance. She's won awards. She's a filmmaker, and she's an incredible woman. And you know that story about the rats? She's actually making a film about that. Me and her are making it together. So you're going to see that. So I just wanted to finish off my speech with telling you about, everybody always asks me, what's the best experience? What's the best memory of the Olympics? So I met a lot of cool people. I met Muhammad Ali. I fought Venus and Serena Williams for a phone booth, and I won. But my best experience was the night before my first game against Russia. I called my mother and my sisters, and I said, they were there in Australia to see me play. And I said, how's everything going? Are you excited? She's like, oh, how are you going to see us? Are you going to, so many people? She was kind of nervous, as if I wouldn't know she was there, right? And I said to her, I don't know. And my little sister grabs the phone and she goes, don't worry, we got it covered. I was like, oh boy. So the next day I'm walking out for my game, and I was number 12, so I'm coming at the end, and I'm looking up in the stands, and my eyes rest on a girl who had dyed her hair fire engine red. And she'd stuck it up like a firework had gone off on her head. Face is all painted, and she had a big sign going, go, Waneek, go. And I was like, oh my God. They said, even back home in Ganawage, you know how the cameras pan the crowd for the crazy people? She was on TV more than me. because she was so crazy. And the thing about, I thought, is like, you know, my mom, who's just as crazy as her, I thought she'd be next to her doing something nuts. But she's actually, I could see from where I was standing, she was kind of just standing there and crying. And she's got really beautiful green eyes. And I was like, what's she crying about? What did they do to her? And I couldn't ask her, right? It's like I thought someone was mean to my mom or something. So I played the Russians. We tied them, got out, ran, did all the media stuff, ran up to the stands, saw my mom. I said, Mom, are you okay? She's hugging me. Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. She said, but when you came out, it finally dawned on me, it sunk in that you were at the Olympics. And she said, I remember the promise I made to you when you were that little girl, when you said you wanted to go to the Olympics. And I promised you that I would help you. She said, so many times we didn't have money or food. So hard, but we found a way. And she said, when you walked out there, realizing your dream, she said, I was proud of myself as a mom. And I thought, man, that's what it's all about, right? Making your mom cry because she's so proud of herself. I mean, I made her cry many times because she was so pissed at me. But that one time that she was so proud, you know, that's what my Olympics experience is about. This is why I'm so passionate about making dreams come true for our people, is because we have so much to contribute to our communities, to our families, put to this country. We are the biggest untapped resource this country has. And I believe now that I'm a mom, and I think to myself, I fought on many front lines for our people. And I've been at so many different communities. I've had the honor of speaking. And now that my children, my daughter is of the age where she asks me, she says, Mom, you know, she wants to know what it means to be Ungwahunwe, what it means to be Canadian, because she's both, right? Her father's Canadian, her mother's Ungwahunwe. And I think to myself, I want to be able to tell her, when she asks me, Mom, what did you do to make Canada the best place on earth for all people to live? What did you do? Did you unify people or did you divide people? And I want her to inherit a country where that fight is no longer part of her reality. I want to work to make this country a fair, an honorable, and safe place for my little Indigenous woman who's going to grow up. I want her to be safe. I want her to be successful. I want her to realize her dreams. And we can only do that if we extend our hands across to each other, across nations, across clans, whatever it is that divides us. We need to come together. If we can't do it for each other, do it for our kids. They deserve it. And I never want to see, the reason why I speak about Oka and I tell people about it is because I want to make sure it never happens again. I do not want it to happen again. It does not have to happen again. It can happen again, and it's never off the table. But we have to come from that place of ganurunquatsara with each other. Love and honor and respect. And that's why I come here tonight to tell you that I will always have my hand extended to all of our people. And I think that I'm kind of like the Borg. I'm such a nerd. Sci-fi, anybody know who the Borg is? Right? I believe I'm like the Borg. You will become part of my team, right? And I do believe that. I do strongly believe and every time I get a chance to speak, this is what I say. I think this country is ripe for this change, but it's not going to come easily. But I think that this word I taught you today about Ganurunquatsara, that's something that you have to take home with you. And remember, I always come from a place of love. And I'm here today because of that. Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
Well, it gives me a great pleasure to also introduce two young ladies here who are going to do some throat singing for us. Ava and Sophie, can you come up and give us a teaching about your singing?
My name is Sopa Sorak. I'm from Nain Nunat Savut, which is one of the four Inuit regions in Canada. And
And I'm Eva Obed, also from Manitobah.
We're here in Ottawa studying Inuit culture. We're taking Nunavut Sivuniksavut. They're partnered with Algonquin College, and I applied for this program because it's about Inuit culture and history, and I applied because I felt that I was losing my culture and I need to gain it back. And in this program, we learn about land claims, Inuit history, government-related issues, and attending this program, it helped me gain pride in who I am and who my ancestors are, and I gained a lot of appreciation as to who I am, and I just feel honored here to show you guys part of our culture. So tonight we're throat singing, and we're going to sing a few songs. You want to talk about throat singing?
Throat singing, I have been doing it for like 15 years, and I find it's a really, really strong tradition in our Inuit culture, and I'm really, really grateful and thankful to have learned how to keep our tradition alive. And I'm also grateful to have to apply to the Nunavut Sivuniks program, because culture is really, it completes me. It's who we are, who I am.
So throat singing, back in the day, the husbands used to go out on the land for long periods of time, and the wives stayed home and tended to their families, so they needed some type of entertainment, and throat singing was one of them. It was also used to calm their babies down, because they carried their babies in their back and bring their babies to sleep, so they soothed their babies. And this one was one of the songs that brought their babies to sleep. It's called the Love Song. Here it goes. Thank you. So throat singing, it's used by the sounds of your breath, by the sounds of your voice, and mainly by the sounds of your throat. The next song is sounds of our language. In the vowels of our language, in Inuktitut, we have a, I, u, a, I, u, u, and we're going to show a representation of our language. throat singing is also a competition for the women to keep themselves excited, I guess.
And since I've been doing it for a long time, and she just started like a year ago or so, I'm testing her.
Yeah. No, this song is called The Bear and Wolf, and it's this one we have to control our breathing, and it's gets faster and faster. And finally, my favorite one is called Poor Little Puppy. In Inuktitut, it's called Himmigalopik. And this song, there's the story behind this song is a little girl. She had a puppy, and I don't know exactly what the story is, but from my knowledge, it's the puppy was dying, I think, and she cared for the puppy, and she wanted to keep it to help the puppy to survive. And yeah.
As the puppy grew, it grew to become the leader of her dog team.
I lost my breath. There are a lot of different types of throat singing or lots of different songs. Since I'm just learning, I don't know very much. These four are the main ones that I can throat sing properly. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our entertainment for the evening. But before we stop, I just want to thank the staff of the Alberta Bay staff, and Jim, you and your team have done a phenomenal job of this symposium. I have nothing but compliments. And with that, a good night.